One of the sport of MMA's all-time biggest fan favorites will be making his long-awaited return to the octagon this year. And though most of us gave up hope on seeing Nick Diaz competing ever again, in a completely unexpected turn of events, the UFC moved to book his comeback matchup against Robbie Lawler at UFC 266. So with that in mind, we're going to take a look at what some of Nick's fellow fighters have had to say about him over the years, what they truly think of this Stockton-born legend. Number 10. Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, no, like everything that he says, it comes across really clear, which I think a lot of people won't get that hearing a lot of his interviews. But no, I totally understand a lot of things he's saying, and like, I know a lot of things he could learn, and he knows tons of things I'd love to learn, So I think it's awesome.
Nick once famously said that he never really used to drink until he met Ronda Rousey, which, when you stop and think about it, is an absolutely crazy thought. But according to both parties, these two esteemed legends of the sport trained together on a number of occasions, giving each other pointers in the hopes of filling out their respective games. Iron sharpens iron, as they say, and when she was asked for her opinion on Nick as a fighter and training partner, Rousey was full of praise, citing him as someone who has taught her many things about jiu-jitsu. Ronda, whose base is of course set in judo, called Diaz an excellent teacher of his craft and a fantastic example of a true martial artist. Nick himself had similarly nice things to say about the former Olympian, and as many of you will remember, Ronda was one of the biggest names to jump to Diaz's aid when he was given his ridiculous 5-year ban from competition after testing positive for marijuana traces. Number 9. BJ Penn.
No, I haven't talked to him. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter. I don't really care.
BJ Penn, the man who welcomed Nick to the UFC during his second stint in the promotion, also had quite a high level of respect for Diaz, despite the heavy beatdown he sustained over the course of the 3 rounds of action. That said, the animosity that existed between the two in the lead-up to the fight hadn't fully dissipated for BJ, with him stating that his attitude towards Nick was now one of indifference more than anything else. Penn's downward spiral into late career turmoil hadn't fully gotten underway at this point in time. But in many ways, Nick's high-volume showcase set the tone for what would follow for this legendary former 2-weight world champion. Number 8. Carlos Condit. Next up, we have one of the more memorable moments involving Nick Diaz in the UFC. After he sustained a narrow defeat at the hands of Carlos Condit, it marked the end of a scintillating run of form that saw Diaz carve out an impressive reign as the Strikeforce welterweight champion. And though Condit managed to get past Diaz only by the most narrow of margins, his strategy coming into the fight was indeed a successful one, with him utilizing movement and strikes from a distance to avoid giving Nick the war he desired. And when he was asked post-fight about being in there with the famously sharp-tongued Diaz, his response was truly hilarious.
Well, one of the things, I threw a spinning back fist or something. He told me, so we're throwing spinning shit now? and I kind of just, I had to crack a smile at that one and just told him, yep, yes I am.
An iconic moment that could have been missed altogether had Condit not been directly questioned. Number 7. Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman has done an excellent job in recent times of truly establishing himself as one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. With each passing title defense, Usman has not only been furthering his attack on George St Pierre's 170-pound GOAT status, but on top of this, he has very noticeably been rounding out his skill set, improving massively with each passing fight. And when he was asked about the imminent return of Nick Diaz, his take on the Stockton brawler basically seemed to indicate that he'd be surprised to see the elder Diaz brother facing him down inside the octagon.
If Nick wants to get in here and deal with this African lion, more power to him.
That said, he didn't seem opposed to this marquee matchup if it ever came to pass. Number 6. George St Pierre. Next up, we have one of Diaz's greatest rivals, a man who Nick managed to well and truly rattle with his trash talk, even if it didn't show on fight night. George St Pierre remains one of the most mentally tough fighters to ever compete in the sport. And while he himself is as respectful as can be, there was something about Diaz's unique attitude that really did seem to bother GSP. This, of course, led to them sharing one of the most riveting rivalries in the history of MMA. However, when the time came for them to fight, the bout itself wasn't overly competitive, with St Pierre controlling Nick for the vast majority of the time they spent inside the octagon together. GSP's opinion on Nick eventually softened over the years, with him eventually describing the former Strikeforce champion as misunderstood and far more intelligent than most give him credit for.
Nick is not crazy. Nick is a very, very smart guy. People, they're like, oh, Nick is crazy. That's a persona that he has to intimidate people. It's like a guy at school, a bully. That remember people that used to bully me before. They tried to make me believe they're ready to kill people.
Number 5. Colby Covington.
Yeah, I would love to fight Nick. He's a high pressure fighter. I'd love to fight him. It'd be an easy fight, and I'd definitely retire him. Just like I retired Tyron Woodley tonight, Nick Diaz would never fight again, I promise you, after I got done with him.
It's quite odd to hear Colby Covington talk about a fighter without completely disregarding them with disparaging comments. But upon being asked about a potential matchup with Nick Diaz, Colby wasn't his usual mean-spirited self. I mean, yes, he did say that it would be an easy fight for him and that he'd likely retire Diaz there and then. But all things considered, the tone of his response seemed to suggest that he had at least some respect for Nick, calling him a high-pressure fighter that he would love to fight. Maybe we're misreading it, but in comparison to some of Covington's more venomous descriptions, it could well be said that his take on Nick Diaz shows at least some level of respect. And when you consider that Colby's high-volume striking game shares some similarities with Nick's, perhaps there's more to this man than meets the eye. Number 4. Tyron Woodley. Though now since departed from the UFC, Tyron Woodley's status as one of the greatest welterweights of all time has been set in stone for all time. Indeed, his fall from grace saw him lose 4 incredibly one-sided matchups in a row, but during his peak, he was certainly a force to be reckoned with at the top of the welterweight pile. And at that point in time, though it seemed like Nate was the one who was closer to a matchup with Woodley, that didn't stop the champ from calling out his brother, Nick.
Get your weak ass out of here. You could have fought me a long time ago. Now you... Wait, man, why you fighting me? Matter of fact, I got his brother over here. Hey, Nate. Let me open up the door, Nate. Let me in. Nate, where you at, my man? Why your brother talking shit on me? I'm gonna fight G-Wood, that's with Doug. All night. You don't want none of this. That's knock his ass out. That's with Doug.
And though it would be another 3 years before Diaz would announce his comeback, it just goes to show how unavoidable a presence he has been in the sport, even as an outsider. Number 3. Nate Diaz. Next up, we come to perhaps the most important opinion of the lot, the opinion of Nick's brother, Nate. As most of you will know, the Diaz brothers share a bond that is in a category of its own in the fight game. Though Nick was the first of the two to start his journey into MMA, he soon brought Nate into the fray, teaching him the ropes in both boxing and jiu-jitsu before he eventually made his own mark on the fight game down the line. And whenever Nate is asked about his brother's influence, he only has the highest of praise to give.
Yeah, it's always better when he's here. He's the one who started me on the whole journey, and come on, it's good.
Ahead of his UFC 244 clash with Jorge Masvidal, Nate just seemed to be happy that Nick's frankly ridiculous suspension had lifted, allowing him to be present in his corner as they fought. Some bonds run thicker than others, and when it comes to the Diaz brothers, their connection is just on a whole other level. Number 2. Conor McGregor. Prior to his development into the massive crossover sensation that he is today, Conor McGregor once shared the stage with Nick Diaz during a UFC press conference. And though he would later become one of Nick's brother Nate's greatest rivals, when both Conor and Nick were asked about each other and their fighting styles, the resulting answers were pretty memorable.
Nick, what do you think of Conor's fighting style? And then Conor, the same question about Nick.
I like it.
I like it too.
It was a brief but charming moment between two of the sport's most iconic fighters. Of course, things would eventually turn sour between the two, namely at the UFC 202 press conference that was quickly called off due to the now infamous bottle throwing incident. But all in all, it was refreshing to see these two guys have such a cordial interaction. Number 1. Robbie Lawler. And finally, we come to the man who will share the octagon with Diaz later this year, the legendary former welterweight champion, Robbie Lawler. The pair of course met once before back in 2004, where Nick managed to upset the odds by breaking off from the script and largely outstriking Lawler on his way to a second-round knockout victory. And though that fight happened 17 years ago, the anticipation levels for this rematch are definitely building. Lawler himself doesn't seem to hold much resentment towards Nick these days, however, and during Diaz's heavily publicized ban from the sport, actually spoke out in defense of his one-time rival.
That's just ridiculous. It's not life, but it's pretty much life. It's like 5 years, but it's like, come on, man. The guy's got to eat. I don't think it's good for the sport. I feel like this guy's a true fighter, a guy who goes out there and gives it his all.
Whether any animosity will build between the two during fight night remains to be seen. But either way, it's pretty clear that we have an excellent matchup on our hands for September 25th. And that will just about do it for this video. If you enjoyed our list, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.